All right, good evening and welcome to the Baking Innovations 2022 Forum from the Home Baking Association. Tonight's topic is Celebrations Take the Cake. And we have a number of speakers for you tonight. And just a little bit of housekeeping. Participants in the forum will be muted. So if you have a question or a comment, please put it in the chat window. And we'll also be having a couple of little poll questions and little mini surveys. And I'll ask you to put your answers in the chat function as well. And then I will tally those and announce those results as we get to them. So to begin, I'm going to turn it over to Charlene Patton, who's the Executive Director of the Home Baking Association, and she's going to introduce our evening.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome to the Home Baking Association's Baking Forum for Celebrations Take Cake. Just briefly about the Home Baking Association, we're a nonprofit association. We have 34 members here. Look at those logos because they believe in you. Our mission is to provide resources to educators. An educator to us could be in the classroom, a community program, a parent teaching at home. But these members provide resources and dollars to help you have resources and educational materials. So we ask you to support them. We also have partners that we work with, and these partners help extend the message of the Home Baking Association. We thank them for being a partner with us to provide resources to you as well. And then we have a new category, our associate members, and that's Bigger Bolder Baking and Baker Betty. And we welcome them as bloggers, authors who want to also share their information with you. So welcome. We hope you enjoy this evening. Lots of great information. And Tom is going to introduce our first poll question.
Thank you, Charlene. So our first question of the night is we want to learn a little bit more about what types of cakes that you bake most often. So what we'd like you to do in the chat, just tell us which of these cake types that we have here that you bake most often, and then how often you bake it. So for example, you might say bundt cake 4 times a year, and just put that in the chat and we'll announce those results in a little bit. So now you want to leave that up for another second or two, Sharon?
Sure, I think that's
okay.
Okay.
And
Okay,
whenever you're
everybody got
ready-
the details. All right, I'll
All right,
pass.
you can advance to the next slide. Great. And so I'd like to introduce our first speaker for tonight, Chef Eleonora Lahud. She's a research chef with ASR Group, and she's going to be talking about icings, buttercreams, and meringues. So welcome, Chef.
Pass it to you.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen before I introduce myself. And I'm sure you can see it now.
We can.
Thank you. Let me do some, there we go. So my name is Eleonora Lahud. Just thinking a little bit, so it'll come up. And I'm the research chef for ASR Group. ASR Group, we are owners of the brands that you probably are very familiar with, Domino. We also have CNA Sugar. We are owners of Florida Crystals. But we have other brands around the globe. In Canada, we have Red Path. In the UK, we have Tate & Lyle. In Portugal, we have Sidul. So we know sugar. We are experts in sugar. And we want to share with you our knowledge. So when I was invited to this forum this time, I was extremely excited because cakes, it's one of my favorite things to bake. And I believe that digging a little bit deeper into icings, buttercreams, and meringues is important, just to give you some guidance and some tips on how to use them, what to prepare them, some definitions, some ingredients, some techniques. So thank you so much for joining us today. So let's start with some definitions. What is an icing or a frosting? Those terms are used commonly when we're talking about a formula that we use to cover or decorate cakes, cookies, and pastries. I've decided to separate them into main groups. We can call subgroups are meringues, buttercreams, flat icings, and royal icings. The composition of your icing or your frosting will depend on the application. Icings and frostings will provide a longer shelf life for your cake, preventing the cake to dry out. So whenever you're covering that cake with your icing, that will maintain the moisture of the cake in, and that will give it a longer shelf life. The cake won't go stale too fast. It also improves the visual appeal. We've all seen the beautiful decorations, beautiful colors, flowers made out of frosting. So that's the appeal, right? That you see something, we eat with our eyes first. So you see something beautiful, something appealing. The frosting, that's one of the objectives of adding frosting to your cake. And also improves the taste and the texture. It balances the flavor of your cake. It provides mouthfeel. It provides texture. So that all that is very pleasant when you're eating your cake. So let's start with meringues. This is one of my favorite frostings. I'm originally from El Salvador, so we use a lot of meringues to cover our cakes. It's made from sugar and egg whites, and they vary in composition depending on the ratio of sugar to egg whites that you use and the method you use as well. Meringues can be classified as cooked and uncooked meringues. So what are the types of meringues out there? We're going to start with a French meringue. That is an uncooked meringue, and that's the one that we're most familiar with. It's usually a 1-to-1 ratio of egg whites to sugar, or 1-to-2 ratio, depending on the application. A 1-to-1 egg white sugar ratio will yield a softer meringue, and it's ideal for topping pies, lemon meringue pie, to do inclusion in a chocolate mousse, for example, when you're preparing a souffle, when you're using it as an ingredient, let's say it that way, or part of your component of your sponge cake to make macarons. A 1-to-2 ratio will yield a firmer meringue. Then we move on to a Swiss meringue. These we classified as cooked, and this is denser and a more stable meringue than a French meringue. So if you frost your cake with a Swiss meringue, will hold for a longer period of time because it's cooked, and that provides stability to the meringue. This meringue is commonly used when you make meringue cookies or as a base for buttercreams. It's used for topping cakes or pies, and it's characterized by heating egg whites with sugar before whipping. The way I do it, it's in I use my bowl of my stand electric mixer over a double boiler, and I whisk the sugar with the egg whites until egg whites the mixture reach between 120 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Then I move the bowl to the stand mixer with the whip attachment, and I go ahead and whip my meringue. Depending on my application, I will go ahead and whip between soft, medium, or hard peaks. For frosting a cake, I will recommend like a harder peak, so it has more stability. And then the Italian meringue. This is also a cooked meringue, and this one poses a little bit more of a challenge, but it's extremely stable, and it's made using egg whites and a hot cooked sugar syrup. You prepare the syrup until it reaches 240 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you beat your egg whites, and when they come to it start foaming and they create a meringue, you start adding the syrup. The technique may require some practice, but the meringue is fabulous. It's very soft, it's very luscious, it's silky and shiny. So it's very beautiful. Here are some tips of working with meringues. It's very extremely important that you work with clean utensils and equipment. Oils and fats will inhibit the creation of a stable foam. If you have even a little bit of fat in your foam or in your meringue, it won't grow. So you won't achieve the best volume in your meringue. The ideal temperature for maximum volume of egg whites, it's anywhere between 69 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. We say room temperature. That will be the best temperature for those egg whites to foam in a beautiful way to the best volume. And then, as I said, you can develop the peaks into soft, medium, or stiff peaks, depending on the application you're planning for your meringue. So now we move to buttercreams. So in its basic form, buttercream is prepared using just a few ingredients: butter, powdered sugar, milk or cream, and some flavor or color. It's often combined with meringue for a lighter texture. And here, one of the ingredients I mentioned, it's butter. That I have to say, it's like more upscale buttercream. Shortening and other fats are commercially, most of the time, are used to prepare buttercreams. At home, bakers, we tend to use more butter for the production of buttercreams. So let's talk a little bit about the types of buttercreams. Let's start with the basic or the American buttercream, the one we're used to eating. It has butter and other fats, as I mentioned, shortening. There are special shortenings for buttercream. Then powdered sugar, some liquid. You can decide to use milk or half and half, or maybe a little bit of cream. And then color and flavor. The choice of the fat that you're using for your buttercream will determine the mouthfeel and the melting point and the color. If you're using butter, the buttercream will tend to be a little bit more on the creamier side. If it's shortening, it will be whiter. And the mouthfeel, if you're using butter, it's going to melt in your mouth easily, where when shortening is used, it tends to linger there a little bit longer. A French buttercream, it's based on a pâte à bombe. What is that? That it's an egg yolk base foam. This is a foam that you create with sugar, granulated sugar, and the whole egg, and you create a foam. And then you add the butter. This is very rich. It's extremely rich buttercream, but I have to share with you that in our test kitchens last week, we developed one that we're calling, and this is a sneak peek, a golden buttercream, because it's made with our golden sugar, and it was fabulous. I find that French buttercream, it's easier to work with, and it's very stable. This is one of my favorites. Swiss buttercream is made with a base of Swiss meringue, and then softened butter is added to that meringue. Until the full volume it's achieved. It's not as light as Italian buttercream, but it's quicker and a simple process. And then the Italian buttercream, that's based off a meringue, an Italian meringue, and then you add the butter. It's very light. It's delicious and melts in your mouth, and it's very, very stable as well. Some tips of working with buttercream: use your buttercream at room temperature. If it has been stored in the refrigerator, allow your buttercream to soften at room temperature for at least an hour before using. And if you freeze the buttercreams freeze pretty well. Move it to your refrigerator so it starts to defrost, and then leave it outside for an hour so it's easy to work with. Make sure your buttercream is smooth and free of air pockets. A technique that I use is I use a spatula and try to smooth my buttercream down before using it and trying to eliminate some of the air bubbles. We're trying to eliminate all the air bubbles that we see. So it's beautiful when you apply. And just be creative. Add colors and flavors that are different, that are mix some of them, and you're gonna have a success. So the next one is a flat icing. This is a very, very simple icing, but we're very familiar and we tend to enjoy this icing very much. It's a quick preparation made from powdered sugar and a liquid such as milk, lemon juice, or even just water. You just add a little water to powdered sugar. Tips to working with flat icing. I use sometimes half and half instead of milk, and that will give the icing a wider, creamier look. Also, you can use fruit juices like a freshly squeezed lemon juice or freshly squeezed orange juice, some extracts, liqueurs to give it that different flavor. Also, and this is very popular, and we are doing it a lot in our kitchens, consider natural colors and natural flavors as well. We recently developed a hibiscus flower flat icing, which we mix powdered sugar with powdered hibiscus flower, and then we add half and half or a little bit of water, and it provides a beautiful color, like a lilac color flat icing with some sour notes in the flat icing. That was beautiful. Also, matcha tea. You can do some matcha tea powder in your flat icing, and it gives you that a beautiful green color. But we're also using turmeric if you want some yellow there, or pulverized dried fruits. Strawberries, for example, you pulverize the dry fruit, dried freeze strawberries, you pulverize them, mix them with powdered sugar, and then add the liquid, and you're going to have the fresh flavor of strawberries in your icing. So I encourage you to try them all. They're beautiful. They're usually used when a cake is pretty rich, like pound cake, which you just need a little bit just to decorate. You don't need a lot of richness in that cake. A flat icing can be stored in the refrigerator up to 3 days. Now we go to royal icing. So this is what's usually used for holidays, for Christmas so much, to decorate our beautiful cookies for Christmas. The basic ingredients, it's powdered sugar, water, and egg whites or meringue powder. The difference between the royal icing and flat icing is that royal icing will set firm. The ratio of sugar to liquid will determine the thickness of your icing. You probably heard the term flood work, which the thicker consistency of royal icing you will use to create the boards. And for example, in that cookie that you see right there, we use it for decoration, whereas a less viscous icing, when we add more water, we're trying to flood the cookie. So it floods the whole cookie around and it covers the cookie completely. So that ratio is determined by the liquid that you add to your royal icing. If you are using fresh egg whites, store in the refrigerator if you have leftovers. If using meringue powder, you can store at room temperature. So here I want to give you some tips on assembling layer cakes. Make sure you have all the components of your cake ready to go. So at the time that you are going to assemble your cake, you already have your cake, your filling, your buttercream, your tips, your bags ready to go. Don't plan to go back and forth, pull them out of the drawer. No, you are ready to go. Know that you have all your ingredients or your components and all your equipment to start assembling your cake. I recommend, if you bake the cake the same day, to refrigerate the cake at least 15 minutes before assembling. Chill cakes are firmer and easier to work with. Cakes also freeze pretty well. If you cover them in plastic wrap, you can put them in the freezer and they will last for a long time. Just pull them out, probably an hour before you start assembling the cake, and that will work great. Place the cake on a cake board. That's important to provide support or a firm base, and that also allows for transportation of the cake. If you're decorating your cake, if you have a base, you can put it in a platter, you can put it in a stand, you can move it around easy. You glue the cake to the board by adding a little bit of buttercream so it's not moving around. Use a serrated knife to cut the layers of the cake. If the top of the cake is not even, set it side down on the board so you have the even part here, and then you can start assembling. Soak the layers of the cake with a simple syrup to keep the cake moist. Simple syrup, it's just water and sugar. But that cake that I was talking to you about that we prepared last week, we did not use water, we used champagne and sugar. So it was a fantastic syrup to soak our cakes with. Apply the filling with a piping bag for a cleaner finish, and also for that provides the cake to be even, the filling to be even as you're assembling your cake. Just gently pipe a ring around the edge of the cake and then fill out the rest of the surface. Refrigerate your cake after applying the filling for a firmer cake. It's key when decorating a cake. You cannot rush a cake, be patient. And then here are some tips for frosting a cake. Apply a crumb coat to your cake. A crumb coat is a very thin layer of buttercream. Apply to a cake to trap all those cake crumbs that are flying around all the time that can interfere in the final frosting on the cake. After that, you refrigerate the cake. After applying the crumb coat for about 30 minutes, it becomes firm. And then you pull it out, and using a rotating cake stand, you start applying the rest of the buttercream to that cake. And again, I stress, be patient. Patience is key when decorating a cake. As professionals, we sometimes believe that our skills are there and that we can rush. And no, we have to be patient. And then just to finish, I want to recommend some buttercreams from our test kitchen. These have all been developed by our test kitchens. And you can go to dominosugar.com or cnhsugar.com and you'll find beautiful buttercreams. I recommend our chocolate buttercream frosting. The traditional cream cheese frosting, it's beautiful. But the one I want to highlight today, it's our whipped brown sugar buttercream. This is a fantastic buttercream when you want some warmness in your buttercream. This goes fantastic for fall, probably with an apple cake. If you frost it with that whipped brown sugar buttercream, it would just be fabulous. Thank you so much for your time. Those are my slides, and I believe we'll have time for some questions at the end. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Eleonora. This is awesome. It makes me want to, can you tell us more about golden sugar later? I'm sorry.
Of course.
Okay.
I mentioned a golden sugar, and I can give you a little more information later.
That'd be great. So.
Yeah, I think we have our next poll. So before we move on, we didn't have a lot of responses to the first poll, but sheet cakes was the winner. So sheet cakes is popular among this group. Our second poll question, why do you bake a cake most often? So we've got some ideas here: birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, what sorts of celebrations or occasions, and then what cake do people count on you to bring? So kind of a two-part question again. All right. Sharon, if you want to move to the next slide.
Okay.
I will announce our next speaker. So our next speaker is Elizabeth Hagan. She's a family and consumer sciences teacher in Iowa, and she is also a Educator Award winner from the Home Baking Association, and she presented her presentation she's going to share with you today at our most recent annual meeting. So Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. I guess, like you said, my name is Elizabeth Hagan, and I am the Educator Award for 2022 and a family consumer science teacher at Kemper. So we'll just go ahead, and today I'll cover kind of what that Educator Award winning lesson looked like, so you can get familiar with it. Also, they are all posted on the HBA website. So if you would like access to the worksheets or slides, that's where you can find them to download. So today what we're going to do is describe the purpose of the lesson plan, explain each day of the lesson plan, and then also review the importance of baking education. So this is just kind of a general summary and outline of all of the different components of the lesson that I designed for the Home Baking Association.
If I'm pausing too long, Elizabeth, just tell me to move on. I'm happy
Yep,
to-
just go right ahead.
Okay, that's great.
So overall, what the purpose of the lesson is, students are to experience multicultural food while baking at home during COVID. A lot of my students, we were hybrids for some parts of the 2020 school year and 2021. So I wanted them to have the opportunity that they could bake at home or in the classroom, and give them the opportunity to also travel when a lot of people weren't traveling due to the COVID restrictions. The four main components of the lesson consisted of the emphasis. So the lesson covered baking was the primary emphasis of the lesson, but there was also food photography, geography, history, and culture incorporated into it. Before starting the lesson, they did a think, pair, share questionnaire where they answered questions about their experiences with birthday cakes and different cultural foods. For the post-evaluation, we did a baked good rubric, and then also a reflection. And then for community service, they had the option that they could bake a cultural birthday cake for one of their family members or friends, and then create a social media post and explain the cultural significance of the birthday cake. So overall, the summary, kind of the main goals of the lesson. The first thing they did was just explain the history of birthday celebrations and birthday cakes throughout the world. They also then described and identified some different birthday traditions that they celebrate in different countries and cultures around the globe. And then they researched and selected a specific birthday cake that they wanted to prepare and plate. They photographed the cake. They prepared the birthday dessert for a family member. And then they also just formed connections during the pandemic through social media or through kind of small groups where they shared the baked good with everyone. And that's it for that slide. So overall, it lasted over a number of days for us to do this lesson plan. So on the first day, we mainly just covered the history of birthday cakes and the birthday cakes themselves. So it started with that think, pair, share questionnaire, where I just wanted to kind of see what they already knew about birthday cakes and if any of them had any traditions when it came to what types of birthday cakes maybe they made at home, or any cultural celebrations, or something that made their, just kind of sharing their own experiences with birthday cakes. And then we did a reading and questions on birthday cakes. And so it talked through the history of birthday cakes, where birthday cakes originated and how they've evolved over the years, so that they could see why baked goods are an important component of birthday celebrations. So this is, if you're looking for the resources on HBA, this is one of them. So this is the Think, Pair, Share. What you'll kind of find a similar product on the HBA website that explains what my students did in the classroom. And then this is the reading that they did. There are some questions attached. I don't think you can view those though. So on the second day, then we covered the birthday traditions around the globe. So they used a birthday tradition cake lab guide, and then traditions around the globe, and then a cake recipe selection prep sheet. So they wanted to just identify on a map where the different birthday traditions occurred. So they got kind of the geography incorporated into the baking lesson. They also explained how birthday traditions and celebrations vary across the different cultures and across kind of the world in general. And then they picked one of the cultures to research and select as their lab group's cake that they were going to prepare. So this is what those resources look like if you are looking on HBA website. So I'm just going to share a couple of examples of different cultural birthday cakes so you can see them. These slides are also shared on HBA, so you can share with your students if you're wanting to just have the slides already prepared for you. So in the United States, I think a lot of us are familiar with the birthday cakes of kind of icing, fondant, buttercream, decorations, sprinkles, candles. Writing is common. So that was the most common one that my students experience at home. But that was the first one just that we did because most of them are familiar with it. And then in India, we went through it's called the Mawa cake, I think. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's a milk-based cake with nuts. It's most common in Mumbai, and it tends to be really difficult and lengthy to make. So it's considered kind of a rare treat that they only use for special occasions such as birthdays. In Greece, they also, I'm not sure how to say this one either, I guess Rabani, but it's a cake that's made from lemon and semolina. So it's an orange syrup that coats a vanilla cake, and you can also find this in Turkey. And then in Germany, there's the Black Forest region, and that is where the Black Forest cherry cake comes from. So it's a chocolate cake with cherry filling and topped with cherries and chocolate. And I had a lot of students pick this one, and a lot of them liked it. So
Sure.
In China, they tend to have round or rectangular cakes, and they also incorporate a lot of fruit and nuts, as you can see in the pictures. They tend to be colorful and just kind of light and spongy with a whipped frosting as compared to a buttercream frosting. And then here's France. This is sometimes referred to as a king's cake. So it's more of a puff pastry, not really what a lot of us are used to in the US, but then they sprinkle it with powdered sugar, and they also eat this around Christmas or other holidays, and it has kind of an almond flavor and sweet. This is in Japan. These are rice cakes that are served with a little circle shape. They're traditionally white or pink in color, and they're used to celebrate things like New Year's or weddings. The round flat shape symbolizes a happy life. I had a couple of students try these ones out. In general, a lot of the birthday cakes, what my students found is that a lot of them have different symbolism. So kind of the happy life or different candles that are supposed to, get rid of evil spirits for the next year. So there's a lot of symbolism in the different cultural birthday cakes. So that one was kind of fun. This is Mexico. I had a few students make this one. It's the tres leches cake. It originated in Mexico in the 1800s. It's a white cake that's soaked in milk, creams, and a custard. Originally, they were soaked in wine. My students obviously did not do that, but they did the custard. So they topped it with white or a whipped frosting, and it's just a really moist cake that's kind of sweet in flavor and milky. And then this is Norway. So the Norway one is commonly decorated with strawberries and blueberries. So it kind of looks like the Norway national flag. And it tends to be more of a sponge cake just on the interior with some buttercream. And then Egypt, this was the one that I did as an example with some of my students. So these were I think it's pronounced kak, and it dates back to ancient Egypt. So they found the recipe in the Great Pyramid, and it's used to celebrate things like weddings and birthdays. It's made in a variety of shapes. We just made them in circles, and then they stamp them with a sun god, which is Ra. So it's another year around the sun. So that's why they stamp it with the sun god. And then they topped it with powdered sugar. They also eat these in Sudan. One of the challenges with this, some of the cultural cakes had different ingredients that we're not familiar with or tools. So like we didn't have a sun god stamp, obviously. So we just did some forks and kind of drew the stamp on. So you kind of got to improvise, but I think they had fun with it.
Wow. Well, Ramadan has just launched, hasn't it? So this is timely. Yeah.
So I guess that was pretty much it for cultural cakes. We did have other cakes, like I had some Australian cakes that the kids made, and trying to think of the other ones. There was kind of a variety, but those I just shared as examples to kind of get them thinking so that they could select their own. On the third day is when they did their food presentation and food photography. So they had, we defined food photography and food presentation, so kind of familiarize them with that using some Google Slides. And then they identified characteristics of well-plated food. So things like odd numbers, use of color, cleaning up kind of extra spills or edges, and then describing why food plating is important. So just talking about how it entices people to eat it, and then how people are, for birthdays, it kind of adds to the celebration and the fun if it's well plated. So on day 4, then they baked their birthday cake dessert. So there was a baked good evaluation and a camera. So they used the day 3 prep sheet where they drew a picture of their plated cake so that they could plate the cake at kind of according to their plan. So they prepared it in their lab groups, and then they plated it, and then they took photos of it, and then they also shared and tried all the other different baked goods food.
So
And then the last day they presented their birthday cake. So this is when they took that picture and then they made it into a social media post. So this is a student example of the Egyptian cat cake. So they had the choice. They could either, everyone did the social media post with the worksheet, but not everyone did the actual post on the internet. So they just wrote a description that described, in that case, what the cat cake was, where it came from, and the history of it, and then a photograph of the cat cake. So overall, that was just kind of the goals of the lesson and what we did. I think it has the link right there if you're interested in finding the lesson plan on HBA website. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
you know, Tom, do you want to give results of that next poll? But before you do that, I just have to reach out to say that Elizabeth has provided absolutely stellar resources for us, and we are so appreciative. I also know that Chef Eleonora has spoken highly of her food photographer, and maybe you'd like to give a shout out to that photographer right now, Chef. And if you have tips on learning to be a food photographer, now's not a bad time to say something.
Sure. Thank you, Sharon. I have to say, Elizabeth, that I love your lesson plan. I think it's fantastic for kids, and how you are opening their curiosity and all the senses with this lesson plan. It's really fantastic. I can see why you are an award winner. It's just fantastic. Yes, you mentioned, Sharon, that we do our own food photography at our test kitchen. So we have a fabulous photographer. Her name is Livy Bolgius. Her website is Livy Vision. I can share with you later. I think it's key when you're photographing food to have that chemistry between the food stylist or the person preparing the chef and the photographer to understand, have a good dynamic of what you want to do. I think what Elizabeth posted to the kids or taught the kids, it's essential. Where do you want to place it or plate it? Make a plan ahead of time. Those are key actions before you're actually doing your photo shoot. How are you going to present it? How is usually consumed, right? You want to present a photograph that's appealing, but it's also the way that you use food, how it's eaten. Is it with a fork? Is it with a spoon? All those little details are important in food photography and practice. Light, it's very important, but as you get more into photographing your dishes or your cakes, light is very important, but you start getting a sense of a good eye of what you like, how it looks, and what you did to make it look beautiful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, great. Now we're going to have two special speakers for you. our staff members from the Home Baking Association. Sharon Davis is our FCS Education Director and Program Development staff member, and Charlene Patton, whom you've already heard from, our Executive Director. And they're going to talk to you a little bit more to wrap up our forum tonight. Oh, and as Sharon mentioned, so the poll results, again, not too many answers, but holidays seems to be the primary driver for cake baking among this group. So take it away,
Did you
Sharon.
have any special cakes pop up in the names of cakes?
You're the only one that gave any examples. Lazy Daisy cake, I think that's a family cake in your family, and apple cake.
So I have to say that I may look old fashioned, and I guess I am, because you'll see the cake on the slide too. This is a tomato spice cake that King Arthur offers the recipe for. It's just been added to our website as well. But again, those old fashioned lost recipes, sometimes they're lost, sometimes they're not, are wonderful to bring back. And I love finding them again or finding them for the first time. So some of the resources we'd like to highlight to you tonight include the thermometer that our member ThermoWorks provides. They have a special deal going for both teachers and students in labs. But the key part of this is knowing what your temperatures are, because heat is an ingredient. And as Chef stated, it matters what the temperatures of your egg whites might be, or it matters what the temperature of your fats are. We could go on and on. We could do a whole, and maybe we should do a whole forum on temperature. But the Thermopop is the tool that we love to use in our labs, because it's digital, but it's also colorful. You can even get your school colors if you want to. With the Thermopop. So that's part of our guide that we're giving you, part of our information that you'll find to download. You can visit our website for the video that you saw featured there with Chef Martin Earl too. The other thing we certainly want to deliver, and temperature is a part of that, is food safety. We want to deliver a cake that hasn't been stored improperly, or when we're making it, you know, that treat that us kids used to have was to lick the batter off the beaters or the whisks. And we really don't recommend that, because flour food safety and egg food safety are both components of what we want to be sure we practice. For the educators out there, there's some great resources on our website, also at Fight Back. The 5 principal messages we always promote is that flour is minimally processed. It's a raw ingredient, just like eggs. So you want to not cross-contaminate. Wash your hands before you use it and after you use it, after you mix and shape or distribute the batter, and then go ahead and work and clean up your stations as well. Would not want to eat the raw batter and then to cook it to temperature. So you can take the temp of that cake. An internal temp will give you the best answer as to whether it's done enough or done and not raw at center. The pan matters. We like to offer to you some research that was done with Anchor Hocking glass bakeware. And the 4 primary points about baking cake in a glass bake pan is that they retain more moisture, they don't develop burned edges, they have less doming, and a little more even browning. The heat transfer in that heavy duty glass is just stupendous for baking cakes. And of course, this downloadable infographics there on what the glass is when it's made. Anchor Hocking is a US company, and their products are just really extremely great for the bake and take kind of concept, where you're taking a coffee cake or you want to take a snack cake to some kind of potluck or after dinner treat that you're offering at a friend's house. So there are 3 styles, and you can explore that more on their website. But above all, I think that it's just worth noting those extra sized handles are the feature I like the most, because when I'm taking the cake out of the oven, I don't want to drop it and I don't want to get burned. When I'm baking with kids, I like those extra big sized handles on those pans as well, because it's easier to grasp with the pot holders. We also want you to deliver in something that's just the latest, and that is bio-friendly packaging. So if you're, whether it's a bake sale or whether you're just delivering something special to an event, this is bio plastic, and meaning it's made from corn in the USA. It looks like plastic, feels like plastic, but it is biocompostable. Good Natured is a member of HBA, and they do offer all types of sizes and shapes for their products. Now, Charlene's going to tell us a lot about, I hope, the cake baking resource that we're going to provide on the page that our webmaster, Nick Beatty, created for us, for you, and for us to store the information from tonight. Charlene? Is she muted by chance, Tom?
She is, but she can unmute.
There I am. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that. I'm unmuted now. Yes, this is our baking resource guide, and we're just delighted that we can pull all these resources together for you. If you go to the main page of the Home Baking Association, you will also see a link there. We've also added a link to all of our forums that we're doing so that you can visit some of the past forums and also have those information. You'll see the resource guide includes all the PowerPoints and PDFs that we had tonight from our speakers. We thank them very much for sharing all this great information. You'll have also the video from this particular Zoom so that you can refer back to it. And then the resource links, there's two pages of resources that we're providing. We also want to invite you to enter our Educator Award program. The winning lesson that Elizabeth did today is fantastic. We've just closed our 2022 entry information. The deadline is always March 31st. So we ask that you start getting ready now and give us that entry next year, because we'd love to see it and recognize you. Usually the winner is $1,000 and a trip to our annual meeting. And on behalf of the Home Baking Association, we just want to thank our speakers for participating. And Tom, do you have some questions that you'd like to share that we've gotten that we can address to our speakers?
Sorry, now I was muted. Yes, we have a question for Chef Eleonora. Why do I sometimes get a dusty flavor in my flat icing from the powdered sugar? More flavoring needed?
Probably. I'll have to say that depending on the person that's tasting, you probably, the person that made this question, it's able to, different tasters, right? You're probably very sensitive to some flavors and tastes. That happens when you are a trained chef or somebody that cooks a lot. You tend to detect some flavors. That may be from the cornstarch that we add to powdered sugar to prevent clumping in powdered sugar. So you may be detecting that. Not everyone can detect. You're probably a good taster. You have a good palate that can detect that. But yes, a little bit more flavor. You can add a little bit more of vanilla, a little bit more. I like to use almond flavor a lot. You just, kick it up a notch on the flavor, and that will resolve your issue.
Great. And then Sharon also had a question. She wanted you to talk a little bit more about golden sugar.
Oh, thank you, Sharon. Yeah, so you see it back there behind our cake. So golden sugar, it's a new product that we launched probably about 2 years ago, and it's a fantastic product. This is a less processed sugar. So it retains a little bit of molasses in the sugar. It's not completely white because it's less processed. So you will have that little hint of molasses, but you're gonna love it. It gives cakes that additional color, a little bit more of flavor. And as I mentioned before, sneak peek of our golden buttercream. We made this buttercream for the champagne cake that I was talking about. So it provides a beautiful champagne color just by using our golden sugar, like the name says, it's golden. So you can find it at the store, or you can go to Amazon and just give it a try. You're gonna really love it.
Great, thank you. We have another question. What type of frosting is the most durable and longest shelf life?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say that buttercreams, that are made out of shortening probably give you a longer shelf life, right? Those are not my favorite. That will probably give you a longer shelf life than butter that's dairy. Also a flat icing that has a longer shelf life because it's just water or some liquid, very little liquid with sugar. So there's very little water available for microorganisms to grow, but it depends also on the handling. We don't like to give exact amounts of time. We give ranges because you don't know a preparation, how was prepared. But buttercream made out of shortening will last longer, I would say. Meringues, those are very sensitive to time. Those probably won't last as long. So if you're preparing a meringue icing or frosting, I recommend the cake to be eaten that same day.
Great. Well, thank you. And for those, we have had a few people who joined while we were in progress. So if you do have any questions, just feel free to type them into the chat and we can get those to our speakers before we end here. I'll just make one comment. You were talking about food photography. So I've been on a lot of food photography site shoots in my career and have had some experience doing it myself. And that one really important tip is use small dishware. You think a normal size plate is going to be great, but what you end up with is a giant plate dwarfing your item. So the smaller the plate, the better your food looks when you shoot it. I see Eleonora shaking her head.
Yes, that's so true. We have little plates and little silverware as well, like smaller than, probably see those one of our photo shoots. So that fork, which looks normal, it's probably a little smaller than the ones you usually use. Yes.
Yeah.
So I had a question for Elizabeth too. Just wondering, when her students did their cakes and food photography, was there one or two that just stood out that you really were impressed, or it was something new to you?
Yeah, there was one that was pretty cool. I think it's Australia, where it was named after a ballerina, and it was like a meringue with berries. I don't know. If
that's a pavlova.
Okay, yes, I think is that it?
Probably, yes.
That one was pretty cool. I had never seen anything like that, and it was really good and kind of a fun story.
And it's delicious too.
It was pretty too. I liked how it looked. So the Black Forest chocolate cakes are always good too. So those are probably my two favorite.
I know we've been looking at this cake that's on the screen right now for a while, but I would like to know, Chef, how you applied the sprinkles around the base of the.
Well, we're talking about the board, right? That you put at the bottom of the cake. So here's an example of why you need that support. So the way I do it, it's that you do, and you need to practice, I have years and years of practice, but you grab your cake with your hand, with the board that's here, and then you just start applying. You grab over a sheet pan or maybe some parchment paper, so sprinkles don't go all over the place. So you start grabbing some sprinkles, and with your hand, you start applying around. So that's a good question. It requires some technique, but it's fun to do it.
So I think we'll have to have you back to do, and we can do some video in the lab.
Yes, that'll be fun. That'll be fun
doing this. That'd be awesome. And Elizabeth, you too. You keep baking with those young people. I think it's fabulous. Tom, I'm interrupting.
No, all right. I think we're at the top of the hour, so there aren't any more questions. So with that, we'll just like to thank you all for coming. Sharon has put on this last slide a thank you in Ukrainian in support of the Ukrainian people. Дякую, it says. So thank you all. And we will make the recording of this forum available on our website or on our YouTube channel, probably link to it from our website. And you can go back and watch it again or share it with friends. So thank you all for participating, and we look forward to seeing you at a future HBA event.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Good. Thank you, Chef. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.